All right, hello everyone. Today we'll be talking about business forms. The different forms of business organizations. There's something known as sole trader, it's also known as sole proprietor. We've got partnership, we've got private limited, and we've got public limited. The reason why I've written these two with green marker, they've got some similarities. And the reason why I've written these with blue marker is because they've got some similarities. Let's start with sole trader. Now, what's a sole trader or a sole proprietor business? It's a business which is owned by one person. One person would own the business. Just there would be one owner of the business. The owner may or may not employ others. If it's a very, very small business like a shop or a very small shop, the owner might be the only person working, cleaning, doing everything in the business. So he or she is the owner, and he or she has not employed anyone else in the business. So that's a sole trader business. However, there are certain sole trader business that is owned by one person, but there are 3, 4, 5, or maybe few more people employed in such businesses. So sole trader businesses are usually small scale businesses. Usually they're small scale businesses. There can be sole trader businesses that are large, that operates on a larger scale, but generally sole trader businesses are those businesses that operates on a small scale. So generally. So sole trader business has various advantages as well as various disadvantages. If we talk about advantages, now what would be the advantage that we have? Now the plus. What would be advantage? Let's suppose if I'm running a sole trader business, what would be the advantage that I would get by running a sole trader business? The first advantage I would get is that there would be limited amount of capital needed to start the business. So I can, borrow money from my friends or my saving, I can start the business. There would be less overheads. That's the second advantage. There would be less overheads. That means there would be less expenses in running the business. The third advantage of running a sole trader business is it is easy to manage because it operates on a smaller scale. The fourth advantage would be that there would be less legal formalities, less documentation needed for starting a sole trader business. The fifth advantage of running a sole trader business is that all the profit goes to the owner. For instance, if I'm the owner, all the profit would go to me. The sixth advantage of running a sole trader business is that the owner is independent, can choose the time when he wants to work and when he wants to take an off. So sole trader business has various advantages. There are 6 advantages that we've discussed about. However, there are certain disadvantages, minus, that a sole trader faces by running a business as a sole trader. Let's suppose if I'm running a sole trader business, so what disadvantage can I face if I'm running a sole trader business? The first disadvantage that I can face would be unlimited liability. I don't know what my liability is. So these businesses that are sole trader, they have unlimited liability. The owner has unlimited liability. I don't know what my liability would be. For instance, if someone files a case against me, if let's suppose I'm sued, let's suppose maybe my business was not performing well, or maybe one of the customer got injured, let's suppose, and the customer prosecuted my business, and I might have to sell my personal belongings in order to compensate his or her loss. So a sole trader business has unlimited liability. I don't know what my liability would be. It might be possible that my business would worth, let's suppose, $200,000, and I might have to pay, about $500,000 as a compensation. So I don't know what my liability is. My liability is unlimited. So this is one major drawback. The second drawback of a sole trader business is that it is an unincorporated business. That is, the owner and the business has they're considered as same entity. For instance, if let's suppose the business is sued, the owner will be held legally responsible because the owner and the business are considered to be one. So the two disadvantages are what? Unlimited liability and unincorporated. The third disadvantage would be all the loss. If let's suppose there's a loss, the owner bears all the loss. The fourth disadvantage would be there would be limited sources of finance. For example, just only friends and families, and less banks would be willing to give them loans. Probably they might have less collateral available. Another drawback of running a sole trader business is that a sole trader business may lack sufficient funds for research and development. So there are both advantages and disadvantages of running a sole trader business. However, if we talk about a partnership business is a business in which there is a minimum of 2 partners and a maximum of 20 partners running the business. There can be advantages plus. Now, what can be advantage of running a sole trader business? There would be more pool of finance. There would be more pool of finance. For example, there would be 20 partners or there might be 14 partners, so they all would bring in money. So there would be more pool of finance. The first advantage. The second advantage can be work can be divided. For example, okay, one of the partners is good with finance. Okay, fine, you look after finance, I look after human resource. Work can be divided. The third advantage is losses are shared. Now, I don't have to bear all the loss because they're partners in the business, so loss will be, divided among the partners. Another advantage of running a partnership business is that a partnership business has more ideas floating into the business because there are more partners, more ideas are floating into the business. Again, if we talk about partnership business, so partnership business generally operates on a slightly larger scale because there's more finance available. So these are actually 5 advantages that we've discussed about partnership. But there are certain drawbacks as well of running a partnership business. The first drawback is the same here. For example, it has unlimited liability. No partner knows what the liability would be. It has unlimited liability. You might have to sell your personal belongings in order to meet the liability of the business. Unlimited liability. The second disadvantage is the same as here. What is the second disadvantage? It is an unincorporated business. That is, the owner and the business both are considered to be the same. So if the business is sued, the owners would be held legally responsible. The third disadvantage is that in a partnership business, profits are shared. It doesn't go in the pocket of just one person, it's divided among all the partners. Another drawback of partnership business, the fourth drawback, is if there's a conflict between partners, the business would suffer. The fifth disadvantage is that if the major partner, maybe let's suppose one of the partner is the major partner that has the major expertise in the business, if that partner withdraws from the business, the entire business may collapse. So there are various advantages and disadvantages of running either a sole trader or a partnership business. But when we talk about private limited companies, now what is meant by the word private limited companies? These are companies that sell their shares to friends, family, relatives, and sometimes to employees. They do not sell their shares to the general public because they are not listed on the stock exchange. What can be the advantage of running a private limited company? More pool of finance. More pool of finance. The second advantage can be the business can operate on a larger scale. The third advantage can be the business can gain economies of scale when it operates on a larger scale. The fourth advantage would be limited liability. Limited liability, because whatever amount you're investing in the business, that's the maximum you can lose. You cannot lose anything beyond that. So the liability you have is limited to the amount you're investing. For instance, if you're investing in a private limited company, $10,000, the maximum you can lose is $10,000, nothing beyond that. Let's suppose another partner has invested $60,000, the maximum he or she can lose is $60,000. So the liability is limited to the amount that you're putting into the business. Okay. Another advantage of a private limited company is that it is an incorporated business. Owner and business are separate legal entity. They're not considered same. So if in case the business is sued, the owners are not legally held responsible because the company and the owners are separate identity. So this was the advantage. However, there are certain drawbacks of running a private limited company. What can be the drawback of running a private limited company? The first drawback is that there is limited source of finance. Are we getting it compared to public limited company? the business is not listed on the stock exchange, so they can't, raise large amount of finance. The third disadvantage is that shares cannot be sold without permission of all the shareholders. So usually in a private limited company, you have to ask almost all the owners before you further sell the shares to someone else. Another drawback of running a private limited company is that there is greater amount of legal work. For example, more documentation required, more legal obligations. So there are certain advantages and disadvantages of running a private limited company. Now, if we talk about public limited company, now what exactly is meant by a public limited company? A public limited company is a company that sells its shares to the general public because it is listed on the stock exchange. A public limited company usually ends with the name PLC, or their abbreviation is PLC. In US, they use the word INC for public limited companies incorporated. So, what can be the advantages of What can be the advantages of running a public limited company? The first advantage is that there is more pool of finance. Business can operate on a larger scale. The third advantage is that shares can easily be sold without permission of other shareholders. There's easy mobility of shares, and there is limited liability. Just the same way we had disadvantages here, but here in these businesses, public limited and private limited, these are considered to be advantages. Limited liability. Whatever you're investing, that's the maximum you can lose, nothing beyond that. Your personal belongings are not at stake. The fifth advantage of running a public limited company is that it is incorporated. Owner and business are considered to be separate legal entity. If in case the business is sued, the owners are not legally held responsible. But on the other hand, there are drawbacks of running a public limited company. Now, what can be the drawbacks of running a public limited company? The drawbacks is that the first drawback is that if more than 50% shares are issued, the business is taken over. For example, let's suppose if 53% shares are issued and I am left with 47% of the shares, so the person buying 53% shares takes over the business. Number two drawback would be there are greater amount of legal formalities. You must register with the registrar, so many legal formalities. The third drawback of running a public limited company is that there can be conflict between board of directors and shareholders. Shareholders might demand for higher dividends, whereas board of directors might want the profit to be reinvested back into the business so that the business can further expand. So there can be conflict between these two. And the fourth drawback is that in a public limited company, there is less financial secrecy because you have to post everything on the stock exchange, the balance sheet, the income statement, the cash flows, so that you can inform the shareholders about the financial position of the company. This information can be used by rivals / competitors, and this can harm the business. One more drawback of running a public limited business is that the fifth drawback is that a public limited company can face one drawback, and this drawback is a divorce between ownership and control. If I am the owner and I'm not controlling the business pretty well, the shareholders can elect another director. So I would be the owner, but someone else would be controlling it. So there is a possibility of divorce between ownership and control. So this usually, businesses, so these two are similar because they've got unlimited liability and they are unincorporated, whereas these two are similar because they've got limited liability and they're incorporated. Usually a business starts with a sole trader that starts to expand, finance is required, it converts into a partnership business, and after a partnership, once it reaches 20 people, 20 partners, it is then converted into a private limited company. After private limited company, once the business further grows in size, more cash is required, more funds are required, the business is converted into a public limited company. And all of them has advantages and disadvantages. However, it is possible for a public limited company to be converted into a private limited company, and so on. And it is possible for a sole trader business to directly start as a private limited company. Are we clear with the idea? Or maybe as a public limited company? Alright guys, thank you very much.